I've been spending the last several videos thinking about and exploring what it is to do an evil act and how to counter that, and how to heal from that, and how to not do that. Uh, it's been interesting to learn about this, because I haven't really spent time thinking about this before, uh, but I think the understanding, or the things that I've been learning, help put things in perspective and help me understand past life events and current life events. And so I wanted to make this video, and this is really talking about the psychology that goes into inequality and abuse of power, and how to counter that and how to heal from it if you've experienced that. So that is the goal of this video. I've been learning about evil, and evil, the way that I define that from what I've learned, is that evil is, an evil act is an act where someone hurts another being. Doesn't have to be human, could be an animal or a plant, or some other living being. It's when somebody hurts another being and hides from the guilt of that action, because they know it was wrong, but they refuse to feel that guilt and acknowledge the hurt that was done, the injury that was done, the trauma. And in hiding from it, they have to create layers of lies to hide from it themselves. Also, to confuse people around them, including the victim, that this ever even happened, or that it is continuing to happen. That is how tricky evil is. Evil is so tricky because the layers of lies make people, including the perpetrator of the trauma and the victim and the surrounding people, not even know that it exists. That's how tricky evil is. It's wow, it is just incredible. These lies, these layers of lies are bought into because they protect like this idea of a relationship between people. I'll explain this a little bit more. So let's see here. The psychology of inequality and abuse of power. All right, so if you think that people are not equal, if another being is not equal to yourself, if you believe that you are more valuable, or that you are more important than another being, then this psychology can take place. So someone who puts themselves above other people, well, that's part of what feeds into narcissism, and also what happens is you have to not feel what the other person is feeling, because if you truly feel what the other being is feeling, and you see life from their eyes and how they and how they're living, and you have empathy for them, then I think it's very hard. It's hard to maintain this illusion that you yourself are more important than the other person. So in order to perpetrate an evil act, you have to first think that you are more important than the other being. It could be a group of beings, and then you have to cut off your empathy for them. So you have to think of them as not beings, as things, as an extension of yourself. This is how you can become evil, and then you tell yourself lies that you always do the right thing, and that you never do the wrong thing, that you are righteous or you are blameless. That's very dangerous. It's very, 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 very dangerous, because that's when you can really hurt a lot of other people, beings. It doesn't have to be people. It could be animals. It could be plants. And just talking about it is concerning. I wanted to talk about this because I feel like this is rampant throughout our relationships and the way our civilization functions. Because there is a hierarchy in our civilization. There's an immense wealth inequality that grows over time. It's been growing. It's been growing over decades, century. And the psychology behind this permeates, I think, multiple relationships in our society, from parent to child, from spouse to person to friend, to government to citizen, to corporation to employee, or corporation to consumer, and also religious leader to a group in the religious group. A person in the religious group. I think this psychology is mirrored in multiple ways, and that is the psychology of an abuser. That's somebody who is perpetrating an evil act that continues, and they tell lies. But the victim can also believe these lies, and that's what's so dangerous about this. And the victim can then internalize this and direct it at themselves, and then also direct it at people they care about without even realizing it. So this is something that I've been learning about, and I think it's super important because it helps me understand how I've lived for. Well, I'm 40 years old right now, so how I've lived for 40 years, and how I've come to understand how I am and how I relate to the world. So, this psychology, I just wanted to read. I wrote down what somebody from a position of power that is abusing that power would say to their victim. So, this is not directed towards you, the listener. I'm going to talk to the heir, as if that heir is a victim. Okay, so this is not towards you. You're wrong. You didn't do this right. You always screw up. You're a bad person. Nobody loves you. You're lucky that you have me, because I'm so good to you and I love you. But you don't deserve it. So those are really toxic words. I just want to dissect what's going on there. So that person is telling, that person from a position of power is telling another person that they are that they are in the wrong, that they're not good enough, that they're never good enough, that they're unlovable. But this person is good to this person and loves them, but tells them that they are despicable, essentially, unlovable. And what happens is the person down here then starts looking at this person and saying, "Oh, you're always right. You're always right. You're never wrong. You're such a good person. I'm so glad that I have you. You love me. You look after me. I don't deserve it." That's what this person starts to believe after hearing this. But it's also confusing because this person says, well, this person loves me, but they say very hurtful things. They hurt my feelings. But they say they love me, so love must mean hurting. It is it's awful. And I was reading, I am currently reading a book by Firestone, Dr. Firestone, a psychologist, called The Fantasy Bond. And in that, he talks about how this can happen in a parent-to-child relationship where the parent is responsible for the child because the child is dependent. They need the parent for survival. But sometimes a parent can hide from their own fear of death by thinking that they can live through the child. And by living through the child as an extension of themselves, but not their own being, their own person, the adult who's trying to hide from fear of death has to do a couple things. They have to overprotect the child to make sure the child stays alive, but emotionally destroy the child or keep them from developing their full independence and full autonomy and agency. Because if that child goes off on their own and is fully independent, then the parent cannot hold on to the illusion that they are escaping death through the child. Because if the child's gone, that illusion's gone. And also, if the child dies, that illusion's gone. So there's the paradox of a seeming paradox of an overprotective but emotionally abusive parent. And I think that that is reflected in multiple ways in our society, not just a parent to a child. But the child can internalize this psychology and then perpetrate it on themselves. So the person can tell themselves, "I always screw up. I am not worthy of being loved. That person loves me." It could be a parent, or if the parent, that person can transfer that parent figure to a president, some political figure, a political party. They could transfer it to a corporation. They could transfer it to a religious leader or a religious entity. So if you think about some, like in religion, so in this country, the United States, where I live, the predominant religion is Christianity. The story is, well, there's many aspects to the story of Jesus, but one of the ones that is really focused on is the fact that each person is a sinner, so they always screw up. They are not worthy of heaven or some good thing happening. their souls are damned. Um, but were it not for one person, or God, Jesus or God, to essentially redeem their souls. Um, it's a mirror of this psychology of telling a child, you're always wrong, no one loves you, but I love you, I'm so good to you, but you don't deserve it. It's the mirror of that. Um, and there's more to Christianity than that. But that is a lot of the focus that I've heard in church. I mean, I grew up I grew up in a Christian family. I went to church as a kid, so I've heard this a lot. But it's not just religion. If you think about the economic system, the culture, they'll tell you, you're poor, you don't have money, you're worthless. If you don't have this item that I'm trying to sell you, then your life is without meaning and no one's going to like you. If you look at commercials, then you see some person, like for some drug or something, some medicine, they're like smiling and they're out skipping in a field. I mean, who skips these days? I haven't skipped in a long time. I should probably go skip. But people in those like arthritis commercials, they're skipping. When's the last time I saw anyone skip? I can't remember. But they're skipping, and then their children they're all by their side, and they are adoring them, and they have lots of friends, and that is what the corporations tell the consumer, that you don't have these things, but if you bought this thing, you would. Same thing for the corporation to the employee. They say, well, you didn't produce enough, you didn't make enough money, or whatever metric they have. And you're replaceable. No one really cares about you. You're lucky that you have this job, because if you didn't have this job, well, you would starve to death, and your family would starve to death. And you don't want that, do you? We love you. We take care of you. But you didn't produce enough last year, and so I don't know. That job's looking kind of shaky. There's a lot of people that want your job. We could hire someone. We could hire someone like next week. There's a whole stack of people that want your job. So there's this. There is the same kind of psychology that's mirrored in a number of ways in our society. Not to mention like politicians do that too, and people they put this father figure or mother figure authority on that politician, and they say, oh, that politician, they always do right, and they're gonna save me, and I'm so lucky that they love me. So there's this kind of pattern of thinking that is echoed in many ways in our society, and I don't think it's healthy. I think it allows lies to be perpetrated and people to be hurt repeatedly without recourse. It allows people to be injured and traumatized, and then they turn it in on themselves, and they traumatize themselves, and then they become the perpetrator of this psychology on other people, like their children or their spouse or the people underneath them in their job, or their neighbor, or the trees, or the animals. I think that this way of thinking is very harmful. I think it destroys people's souls, is what I think. So I've been thinking about how do you think differently, and I think it comes from a place of equality between souls. Like a parent and a child will always have a power differential, but if you think that a child and the adult, their souls are equal, well, then there's a responsibility for the parent to take care of the child's well-being so that that child can grow into an adult as well. It's different than thinking that the child is an extension of the parent and a thing that for the parent to feel good or bad about. The child is an equal being, as is the parent. The parent has a responsibility to help the child grow up. I've talked about inequality between humans and non-humans. Whether it's my doggie, who is she's taking a nap. She's so cute. Hi. Are you feeling okay? We had a nice walk today. We went really far. And she is just passing out. She's gotten pretty shaggy, too. Love you. Love you. She likes to chill on this donut. It's funny because the texture of the carpet and the texture of the donut and her fur is kind of similar. So it's just like 3 different textures of fuzziness. I love her so much. And I'm responsible for her well-being. So I gotta make sure that I don't abuse that power. And I think that comes from viewing my soul and her soul as equal. My soul is not more important than her soul. Same thing with plants, like the trees that are outside. It's a radical different way of viewing the world. Instead of this hierarchy of powerful and weak, it's neighbor to neighbor, person to person, being to being, equal. That's why I made that poem. It's not really a poem. I label it as a poem, but it's more of a way to rethink about how to relate to others. That's the poem that I label it as a poem. It's called Sometimes. And in that, we'll just call it a poem. It's a different way of thinking. It's acknowledging that another being can be good and it can be bad. It can do great things and can do evil things. Can want to be connected and can withdraw from connection. They're a person. They don't screw up all the time. They don't do right all the time. But loving that person for who they are, accepting them for who they are. And that, I think, if you're in the position where you're lower and you look at a person or entity that you have created in your mind to be perfect and blameless, I think this helps see that person as as fallible. Yeah, they can sometimes screw up. Maybe they don't actually. Maybe they don't always have my interest at heart. Maybe they're telling me some lies, but maybe they actually do love me at some level, but not like what they're telling me. That equalizes the people. So when you do that, then the power of that other person is gone, because you realize that you're equal. And then it's easier to see through lies too. Like if that person wants to try to maintain that power differential and control over the weaker person, but the weaker person realizes that, oh wait, we're actually equal. And this person is like, no, I don't want that. I want to stay powerful. I want to be controlling you. But this person is like, wait, no, you're actually equal to me. It's easier to see through the lies that this person will tell the other person to try to dominate them. And that poem or way of thinking goes into viewing the other person as fallible. They're both good and bad. They do both good and evil things. And loving that person, accepting them, but also goes to themselves. So just like how the abuse can be internalized to the person can internalize this other way of thinking of equality, and say to themselves that, oh yeah, I screw up sometimes, but I also do good things. I don't always screw up. I don't always do good things. I'm not a righteous person that's blameless. I've done pretty messed up stuff. I've hurt people. I have perpetrated evil in the past. Then you can look at yourself and realize, oh, well, I'm not as terrible of a person as I thought, but I'm also not blameless. There are things that I feel guilty about that I don't want to do anymore. I have perpetrated this same pattern of abuse to somebody else. Then you got to apologize to yourself and to that other person, or multiple people. Ask for forgiveness and be mindful of that behavior that could have been subconscious. It could be that you didn't even really realize you were doing that, but you were just carrying out the same pattern that you learned when you were a child, and you hurt others. So that this way of thinking is a way to kind of shed that duality, the duality trap of thinking someone is good, but just good. Not they don't have bad, they're just good. Or thinking the other way. Oh, that person's a monster. There is no good about him. In reality, people are somewhere in between. I mean, some people have more good than bad, and vice versa. But it's helpful to shed the absolute black and white, and realize that we live in between, and all the colors could include black and white, but there's all these other colors, and there's all these intensities between blinding light and darkness. So I think this way of thinking is way more healthy. And then you can also be kind to yourself and not tell yourself awful things, because I think a lot of us, myself included, I have been, I tell myself awful things sometimes, really hurt myself, and that is just me doing that to me. No one else is doing it, but I think it was internalized from before. So I think with this other way of thinking when you say that to yourself and you believe it. I think that you can look at yourself more realistically at your positives and negatives, at the things that you do well and the things that you screw up, and the people that you love and that you take care of, and also the things that you've done to hurt the people that you care about, either consciously or subconsciously, and you can be more mindful about it. So that's why I wrote that I made that video called Sometimes. I labeled it as a poem, but it's really more of a way to shed the cognitive pattern of abuse that is, I think, rampant in our society and mirrored in so many different layers of our living. At the beginning, I was talking about how in order to become evil, you've got to put yourself up above others. That's narcissism. And then you have to cut off your connection with other people's feelings or other beings' feelings. So that's lack of empathy. This is almost fully the dark triad. Dark triad includes other things like viewing hurting other beings as necessary to obtain something, and lying is key to obtaining what is needed. That's Machiavellianism. Dark triad is narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. Psychopathy is a lack of regard for others, and an impulsiveness and not thinking through the consequences of actions. So there's a dark triad. Once you've gotten to that point, it seems very hard for someone to come back. So there is seemingly a point of no return, that if you've gone all the way there, that it's almost impossible to come back, according to psychologists who have tried to treat people that went there. And so in a way, I would think of it as it's almost like a disease of the soul. It's almost like an addiction to power and domination. And I think there is a very good reason why people in positions of power often do these horrible acts and hurt people. Politicians, CEOs, religious group leaders. There's stories at least once a month about like religious group leaders abusing children sexually, and in other ways. But that's what usually gets the headlines, is the sexual abuse of children in these supposedly Christian cult groups. Or it doesn't even have to be a cult. It could be just a regular church. There's tons of stories of like celebrities who are wealthy now, running like sex trafficking, or politicians being accused of rape or underage sex trafficking. I don't think that it is a mistake that people who seek this power are also many times the perpetrators of this harm on other beings, because I think that it is really a disease of the soul. It's also addictive. I think people that go to this extent almost like have a black hole inside of them that's just sucking life away from what's around them. But that's, I think, an extreme. I think those are extremes, and I think those are cautionary tales, and they are real. They happen. they're happening. But for the most of us, I think that can happen too. But it's not a black and white thing. It's there's a whole gradation in between having a black hole in your inside of you, sucking the life energy from your surroundings, and being a star that generates energy and beams out light to and love to those around you, and fosters the well-being of the beings around you. I think that would be the equivalent of darkness and blinding light. It's so bright that you can't even tell what it is. It's just white. That would be like someone with dark triad would be like the darkness, having a black hole inside of their soul that just sucks and sucks and sucks. And then like a saint-like figure, like what people would imagine Jesus was. Having just like unconditional love and radiating light and well-being to others. But in reality, everyone falls in between those two extremes, but some more towards one side or to the other. But yeah, there's not. It's not a mistake that people in power are more likely to perpetrate this. So I think that what's important is the opposite of narcissism. It's to see yourself as equal to others, other beings, not including just humans, but other beings in general. And that can include the earth too. And to feel empathy, to exercise empathy. Try to understand how the other beings feel. What are they going through? What are they worried about? What are they happy about? What makes a group of birds out my window gather together on this tree and eat the berries and talk amongst each other? Like what are they talking about? Connecting with your spouse or your child. How was your child's day? What are they thinking about? What worries them? What makes them feel good? Empathy allows you to connect with others, and that was one way that psychologists were trying to help treat people with dark triad, is engage them in trying to learn about other people, to exercise their empathy, and that would decrease the problems that they were having with this dark triad. So viewing yourself as equal, exercising empathy, trying to understand what other beings are going through. Communication is required with that, and truthful communication too. So I think that that's really the way to deal with this problem that I've been focusing on, which is the villager problem. If you're in a village and there's somebody in the village, might be in a position of power, like the mayor or something, and they are, or could just be a slightly wealthy villager, is encouraging the other villagers to hate each other and want to kill each other. In fact, sometimes killing each other. What do you do? Do you murder that person? Well, that gets rid of that person, but it doesn't get rid of what caused that person to want to do those things, and it doesn't get rid of the problem of how the other villagers allowed that to happen. So murdering the troublesome villager, it might give you temporary respite, but it doesn't fix the problem of what led that villager to do those things and want to do those things and actually do them, and what allowed the other villagers to allow it to happen. Do you excommunicate that person? Well, it's the same problem, same issues with that. Do you ignore that person completely, like they're not doing what they're doing? Well, that doesn't really solve the problem either, because that person can just keep doing what they're doing, just without you in the picture, and it still affects you because it affects the whole village. So I think ignoring is not the solution either. In thinking about these things, I think the solution, at least the one I can come up with, is to really be mindful about what's happening, to have the courage to look at the lies that I am telling myself that allows this to continue to go on, and confront those lies, confront the truth, which may actually hurt a lot to look at. There's a reason why a lot of people live under all these blankets of lies, because they're comforting in some way. But to look at the truth, despite how much it might hurt, accept it, and I think communicate and feel empathy with the other villagers. That all the other villagers, including the one that's troublesome, are equal. And that by communicating and feeling empathy, you can make choices that will prevent that situation, I think, from happening again. Now, that sounds really idealistic, but I think that the way that we got to where we are is through lots of very tiny choices, little tiny choices that has accumulated over millennia. There are all these little tiny choices that leads to big things over time when you stack up all those little choices. So I think that really probably the solution that I can see to where we are is to be mindful, be aware, accept that we can do wrong, feel the guilt when it's necessary to feel the guilt. I mean, feeling guilt all the time is paralyzing. But if you hurt someone or something, feel the guilt, realize that what you did was wrong, and then don't do it again. Try to help that person you hurt heal. Communicate, feel empathy, hear what's happening to another person, because if they're getting hurt, well, you're probably going to get hurt too. So trying to understand how the other person got hurt. What can you do to work together? And if there's honest communication between the villagers as a whole, then it's going to be very apparent to everybody that the troublesome villager is the source of the problem. And then, at that point, well, I don't know. What happens then? I think people just see through the lies, and then they just refuse to go along with the lies, and that troublesome villager now is just like that crazy old crank that lies all the time, but no one believes that person's lies anymore. Well, they used to be really powerful and rich in the village, but now everyone knows, what they're all about, and unfortunately they didn't want to change. And so everyone just sees them as that crazy old crank that lives down the street. No one really wants to interact with. Or a even more ideal outcome, which I think this is probably too idealistic, is that person changes how they think, and becomes more integrated into the village, which doesn't seem like it would be very likely, knowing the people that I know in my life who kind of have gone down this path. I don't think that they have the self-awareness, or they do have the self-awareness, but they don't want to think and live differently. I think it's almost like an addiction to control and power, and feeding the black hole that's inside them. That black hole is insatiable. So, yeah, I think that troublesome villager probably won't become a helpful, cooperative villager. But if other people can recognize what's happening, then they can protect themselves and heal from the injuries that have occurred. Now, there is an excellent book that I just finished recently called The Myth of Normal by Gabor Mate. He is a Canadian physician, medical doctor, who has written many books. And The Myth of Normal is about processing trauma. Emotional trauma could be abuse of different kinds, and healing from that, because trauma can lead to disease. Disease is just dis-ease, so you're not at ease, but it can reflect in the body itself. And many traumas, or many diseases that Western medicine treats, or tries to treat, are actually the result of traumas that happened earlier on in life, that were unresolved, or were internalized from somebody else. So that book is amazing. Highly recommend, if anyone's interested in that, looking at Gabor Mate's Myth of Normal. In that book, he describes a way to heal from the trauma that all of us have experienced in some form. And he calls it the 4 A's: authenticity, agency, anger, and acceptance. So we're going to go through that. And then I'm going to talk about group behavior. And I think that's it for this video. Authenticity. Authenticity is being authentic to yourself. Being true to what you actually feel. Because if you lie to yourself, you cannot be authentic. If you feel uncomfortable, but you say, "Oh no, I'm actually fine," you're not authentic. If someone does something and you are like, you feel anger, but then you don't allow yourself to feel it, you repress it. You don't allow yourself to feel angry. You're like, "Nope, actually things are okay. Things are okay." Even though someone did something horrible to you. That is not authentic. And repression has been shown to affect the microbiome, which is the 100 trillion bacteria that live in our gut. They are absolutely key to our body being healthy. And what they eat is they eat the fiber from vegetables and fruits. But you can hurt the health of the microbiome by repressing emotions. That is a study that's been done. They looked at it. They looked at people. It was done in women. They looked at women's microbiomes and their different emotional processing ways to process emotions. And the women that repress emotions, they had unhealthy microbiomes, less biodiversity. So what's important about that? Well, the microbiome is what helps our immune systems stay balanced and fix things that need to be fixed, and not attack things that are fine. So like autoimmune problems. So if you have a good, healthy microbiome, healthy gut, then your emotions are more stable, and not stable. They're more balanced, because emotions are there. They're constantly changing. They're flowing, but it's more balanced in a healthy way. That's the mind gut relationship, and your body, your microbiome will help your immune system be able to fix things up very quickly. So you heal quicker just from the daily wear and tear or injuries. You can heal quicker, and you don't attack things that are fine. So that's autoimmune problems. So that's like different kinds of like rheumatoid arthritis or multiple sclerosis. There's different kinds of like eczema and skin problems or type 1 diabetes. There's many different kinds of autoimmune thyroid problems. So having a healthy microbiome can help fix those problems. But if you repress emotions, you're hurting the microbiome, which is your helper. It's supposed to help you. So authenticity is being true to yourself, seeing things for what they are, seeing your relationships with other people, seeing what maybe someone who's abusing you is the lies that they're telling, and the lies that you have chosen to believe up until now. That's authenticity. The second one is agency, which is the power to choose. We all have the power to choose. Even not choosing is a choice. And once you are authentic and you can see what's happening, you can see how you feel, then you can choose whether to continue the old pattern of thinking and behavior or choose a different one. And which one are you going to choose? How are you going to choose to live? That's agency. And that's why I made that the sometimes video, is to help me realize that I have a choice, and there's a different way that I can live and relate to people than how I was before. Third one is anger. Well, anger is an emotion, but it is probably the emotion that's repressed the most, because when you are in a position of dependency on someone or something else, and that person hurts you, the natural thing is to feel anger, because that's a defense. That's a protection of yourself. If someone hurts you and injures you, it's natural to feel anger. But if you have lied to yourself that person is loving you and you need that person, you have to repress the anger. So if there's say there's a parent and a child, and the child knows that they need that parent to survive, but the parent hurts them, it's easier for the child, instead of the child saying, "Oh, my parent is actually not good. They hurt me." Well, that's an existential threat. That child will have a hard time going on with that belief. They have to either run away and find a new parent, or kill that parent, or just accept that they're being hurt. I know there's just a number of, it's hard. It's hard to do that. So instead, the child will repress the anger and direct it on themselves and say, they double down on those lies that they're being told. I'm worthless. I always screw up. I don't deserve to be loved. So there's a repression there. And anger is usually the main one. So once you have authenticity and truth, you see through the lies, and you realize you have agency, you can choose, You can choose if you want to continue on that path or you want to choose a different path. Then anger helps you protect yourself and protect others. Feeling that anger is healthy, in that it helps you choose what is actually good for yourself and for others. And then the last one that Gabor Mate talks about is acceptance, and that's accepting that the traumatic thing that happened. It happened. That accepting that I've lived under a certain way of thinking that has hurt myself and hurt other people. That I have hurt other people. Accept that I do good things and bad things. That other people do good things and bad things. There are people that maybe they're trying the best they can. Maybe they don't even know how to be good to other people. Maybe all they know is how to hurt other people, and that they're incapable of changing. But they're a person, and that they develop that way for a reason. So the fourth one is acceptance, and acceptance, I think, is actually very close to love. When you love, you accept things how they are, actually how they are, but love is a little bit different. It's also willing for the well-being of other beings. So it's tied in with acceptance. And earlier on, I talked about how Christianity in this country, well, in most countries, for the last, I don't know, it might have been as long as Christianity existed, but it does mirror some of these harmful cognitive patterns of feeling worthless and like you're wrong all the time, and nobody loves you except for one being. There are other parts of Christianity that are the other way of thinking, which is the way of equality and love and well-being, willing the well-being of those around you. And that is, I think, the part of Christianity that I try to focus on. This is not a religious video, but the reason why I talk about religion is because it is, I think, integrally tied to how we relate to others. And I wanted to point out that Christianity has a couple blind spots. No, not blind spots. It has some things that mirror the harmful behavior of cognitive patterns of our society. There's a temptation for a blind spot where, by thinking that you can be forgiven of something awful you did, it can make you feel like you're blameless and righteous, and that can be almost like a short circuit of guilt. And I think that is why a number of people who said that they were Christians and religious perpetrated some awful things like genocide, abuse. I talked about that in a video called Am I Christian? Am I not a Christian? Or does it even really matter? There's one example is a Christian minister who is a soldier leading their men to massacre unarmed Cheyenne Indians. So that's just what has actually happened. So I think that religion has a danger of having people think that they're righteous, and it allows them to perpetrate evil, because they don't they use they those particular individuals are using religion to hide from the guilt of hurting others. I think that's very dangerous. But I think Christianity in particular has some really good things. And I think that is what Jesus was saying was the most important thing. He was asked, like, what's the most important thing? What's the most important commandments? And that's to love God and love your neighbor as you love yourself. So that means it means you got to love yourself, and then you got to love your neighbor as you love yourself. So there's an equality there. So that is loving another being and wishing their well-being as you wish your own well-being. That is very different than the other patterns of thinking. That is a psychology of equality and love. And that's what I try to focus on. And I've been realizing that I've been realizing that, wow, the other way of thinking is pervasive in our society. The last thing I wanted to talk about, which is already a bit longer, but is that group evil. I learned some interesting things about groups, that an individual will make different choices than a group will make. For instance, there is experiments where someone's in a room and then the experimenter tells them they need to wait for something, and then the experimenter pumps in smoke underneath the door. If the person's by themselves and they see smoke coming in, they smell smoke, they get up and then they say, "Oh my gosh, there's a fire. I gotta get out of here." But as soon as you put two strangers in the room and you pump smoke in, there is a delay, because one person they start second guessing themselves and say, "Do I smell smoke?" Well, the other person seems to be okay. I don't want to be the alarmist one. But I think I smell smoke. But the other person doesn't seem to smell smoke, so maybe I'm just imagining it. And then this goes on until finally one of them says, "Hey, do you smell smoke?" And then the other is like, "Yeah, I thought I did," but there is a big delay. And there are so what? As soon as you get two people, and now that's a group. A group behaves differently than an individual. So the individual gives up some of the agency to the group. And in many ways, a group behaves, makes choices that may not reflect what the individual's values are. And I think that's, I just mentioned the massacre of unarmed Indians, Native Americans, by U.S. soldiers led by a Christian minister. Well, it wasn't just the Christian minister; it was all of the soldiers that were under his command, and then they committed this gruesome act. And then they came home. How does that happen? How does a whole group of soldiers do that? So, I think that we have to be really careful when as not only as individuals, but as participants in a group, whether that's a religious group, a political group, and a national group, as an identity as Americans or citizens of your town, or a race, any kind of group that you can think of. If we got to be very careful that the actions of the group are following the actions of the individual as best as possible, and be mindful of that. And if the group is not following that, then to speak up and say, what are we doing? Is this what we really want to do? Is this what you want to do? Talk to your other group mates. Is this what you want? Is that what you want? Is what we're doing what we really want to do? Because this is concerning. I am concerned. You just say, I am concerned. Well, I, as in Gooby, am concerned about the lies that we tell ourselves and to hide from the truth. I am concerned about the incredible wealth inequality that is growing in not just our country, but the other countries as well. I'm concerned about our biodiversity loss, our cutting down of the forest, our consumption, our population levels. I'm concerned. I'm concerned that our civilization relies on fossil fuels that are limited. They're finite. And that while we won't ever be able to pump out all the oil or coal or dig out all the coal, because at some point it becomes too expensive to dig it out. That the return on investment is not worth digging it out anymore, or pumping it out. At some point we're going to run out of those fossil fuels, and our green energy will not be able to power our civilization as we have powered it so far off of fossil fuels. I'm concerned about those things. I'm concerned about the fact that there's so many lies. Every topic has people saying the opposite. It's hard to know what's real anymore. It's hard to know what's true. I'm concerned about the education of people. Like, can people think for themselves anymore? I don't know. It's concerning. I am concerned. I am concerned about people's ability to think logically. I'm concerned. What are our schools doing? Like, what are smartphones doing to kids' brains? What is AI going to do? What is ChatGPT doing to kids learning and writing book reports and essays? Like, those are some of my concerns. But I think that as an individual, we can be mindful about when we participate in a group, when we're part of a group, to speak up. If you're that person with another person in a room and there's smoke coming under the door, say something. Say, hey, I think there's smoke coming under the door. What do you think? Do you smell that? Then you're empathizing with the other person. You're curious. What's the other person experience? But if you're thinking in the old way, the other way, you might think, oh, that person is a stranger. I'm better than them for some reason, whether it's their skin color or how they smell or what clothes they're wearing. I'm more important than them, so I couldn't possibly care about what they think. But I think I smell smoke, but they're not doing anything, so I wouldn't dare talk to them. Then the whole room burns down. Okay, so I think it's important to look at this. Look at how we're thinking. Um, yeah, I think that's what I wanted to talk about. Empathy, equality, and, well, communication, accountability to ourselves to speak up and to each other, and awareness that when you're in a group, there is a tendency not to speak up. But in some ways, group settings might be even more critical than individual settings. Because when there's groups of people, big things can happen, both for good and for bad. So those are the things that were on my mind about this topic, and I'm glad that I talked about it. I hope that this might help somebody, might help you look at the way that you talk to yourself and the way that you treat yourself, the way that you interact with and relate with others. And it might help some people realize that, oh, wait, this relationship I'm in has some problems that I've been lying to myself about. And then you can have agency and choice. Choose to live the way that you want to live. Well, I hope you have a good day or evening wherever you are. And I have some other videos that are. This one was kind of serious. I mean, it is serious. This is how to live, at least how I want to live. I have some other videos that I've been wanting to make about like more interest. I mean, not more interesting. Interesting topics that are not as like soul searching and introspective as this one. So I'll make those videos soon.